Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I started working at this pizza place when I was 16. The owner was this really nice guy who treated his employees well, and honestly, I loved the job. I worked my way up over the years, and when I turned 19, I got promoted to shift leader with a 30-cent raise. Sure, it wasn't much, but our store was pretty slow, and we only had a handful of employees, so I understood. Everything was going smoothly until one day the franchise owner came in during my shift. He seemed a bit stressed, which was unusual for him. He told me we were getting a new manager and that things might change around here. Before he left, he handed me a piece of paper with his personal number on it. He said if I needed anything or if this new manager caused any problems, I should call him directly, without hesitation. The way he said it made me think he was expecting trouble, but I just nodded and tucked the number into my wallet. The next day, I was working my usual 10 in the morning to midnight shift when this guy walked in. He was probably in his 30s, average height, and had this attitude like he owned the place already. He introduced himself as the new manager and told me he was my new boss. He said we needed to talk about some changes around here. When I asked what kind of changes, he wanted to know why there wasn't an assistant manager position. He said this place should have proper management hierarchy. I explained that we probably didn't make enough sales to justify paying for an assistant manager position. He told me to let him worry about the finances and that he would handle staffing decisions from now on. He looked around the store for a few minutes, asked me some basic questions about operations, then left. I honestly thought he was going to promote me to assistant manager. I had been there for 3 years, knew every aspect of the business, and the franchise owner clearly trusted me. I closed that night and had to come in at 4 the next afternoon. When I walked through the door, the new manager was standing there with some girl I'd never seen before. She was wearing one of our uniforms and had this smug look on her face. He introduced her as his roommate and announced that she was my new assistant manager. She told me she'd never worked at a pizza place before, but that she was a really fast learner. She had just lost her job, which was, apparently, her only qualification. I stood there completely speechless. This girl had zero experience in food service, had never worked for our company, and was basically getting handed a position that should have been mine. But it got worse. The manager then told me he was changing my schedule completely. No more morning shifts for me. I would work 4 to midnight 5 days a week instead of my current schedule. Before this mess, I worked 10 in the morning to midnight 4 days a week, plus 4 in the afternoon to close on 2 other days. That gave me plenty of overtime and decent money. Now I was losing all my overtime hours, which was going to hurt me financially. But this was the only job within walking distance of my house, and despite everything, I still loved the work itself. Then he told me I would be training her on everything. I needed to show her how to handle the register, make pizzas, deal with customers, the whole deal. So let me get this straight. They demoted me, cut my hours, eliminated my overtime, and now wanted me to train my replacement. But I needed this job, so I swallowed my pride and agreed. The next couple of weeks were rough but manageable. The new assistant manager was friendly enough, though she clearly had no idea what she was doing. I spent most of my shifts teaching her basic things that should have been covered in proper training. But there was something else bothering me. Every night that I closed, we kept coming up short in the register. Usually it was around $5 or $10, but that's actually a lot of money when you're talking about a small business. The shortages were always happening on nights when I was doing the closing procedures, which meant the blame was falling on me. I decided to bring this to the new manager's attention. Maybe there was some systematic issue we could figure out together. I told him we'd been coming up short almost every night I closed, usually around $10, and asked if he had any idea what might be causing it. His response shocked me. He said if it kept happening, he would have to start taking it out of my paycheck because that was company policy. When I asked if he was accusing me of stealing, he said he wasn't accusing me of anything, just letting me know what he would have to do if the problem continued. I felt completely attacked. I had never stolen a penny from this place in 3 years of working there. The accusation stung, especially since I was the one who brought the problem to his attention in the first place. I told him that was fine, but if we were going to do this, I wanted to start doing shift changes every day. We needed to count down the drawers when I came in so we could figure out where these shortages were actually coming from. He agreed that was fair and said we would start doing that the next day. The very next day I came in at 4 as usual. The assistant manager was getting ready to leave, and I started my routine of clocking in and checking the day's orders on our computer system. I always like to see how lunch went, just to get a sense of how busy we'd been. That's when I noticed something weird. The screen showed that at 12 p.m., one of my regular customers had called and ordered 10 pizzas for pickup, but according to the system, the order had been canceled. This customer was a local business owner who ordered from us at least twice a week and had never canceled an order before. I was in the back office counting the registered drawers while the assistant manager covered the front. Something about this canceled order was bothering me, so I decided to call the customer directly. I didn't want to ask why he canceled because that might seem accusatory. Instead, I took a different approach. I called him and said I was from the pizza place and wanted to check how his experience was today, since we had some new management and wanted to make sure everything went smoothly. He said it was fine overall, though the girl working seemed nice enough. He mentioned that she needed to learn how to use the credit card machine properly. When I asked what he meant, he explained that she had told him she could only accept cash payment, so he had to leave, go to the ATM, come back, and pay $80 in cash for his order. Other than that inconvenience, everything was good. I asked him to confirm that he definitely didn't cancel his order, and he seemed confused. He said he never canceled anything and got his pizzas and paid for them. He wondered why I would think he canceled. After I hung up, my mind was racing. There were two possible explanations. Maybe the credit card machine actually did go down, she could only take cash, so she canceled the order in the computer system until he came back with cash, then forgot to ring it up again. That would be an innocent mistake, or she was stealing the money. I knew if I went to the new manager with this, he wouldn't do anything about it. He had already shown he was more interested in protecting his roommate than running an honest business. So I called the franchise owner directly using the number he had given me. I told him I thought we had a problem and needed his opinion on something. I explained the whole situation with the canceled order that wasn't actually canceled, and how we'd been coming up short every night. He said he thought I was absolutely right about what was happening. He gave me specific instructions on what to do next. First, I could not say a single word about this to either of them. I should let her finish her shift and leave as normal. He explained that if she wasn't stealing, we should come up about $80 over at the end of the night. If she was stealing, the register should break even or be short like usual. I finished counting the drawer from her shift. We were exactly $1 short. The next day was when everything came together. I went in at 4 as usual. The assistant manager was there waiting for the manager to pick her up, which was their normal routine. Then the franchise owner walked through the door unexpectedly. He told the assistant manager he needed her to come with him to the office right away. His tone was serious. He looked at me and said, when my manager got here, I should send him straight back to the office. About 10 minutes later, the manager walked in and asked why the franchise owner was there. I told him I didn't know, but that he wanted to see him in the office. The manager asked what it was about, and I said I honestly had no idea, just that he said to send him back when he got here. The manager disappeared into the office. Maybe 20 minutes later, he came walking out with this stunned expression on his face. He didn't say a word to me, just brushed past and walked straight out to his car. A few minutes after that, the assistant manager came out of the office. She looked at me and said she hoped I was happy with what I had done. Then she grabbed her purse and left. The franchise owner still hadn't come out of the office, so I went back to talk to him. I asked what had happened back there. He told me that in just 3 weeks, the two of them had stolen over $1,000 between them. He said he would never have caught it if I hadn't called him the day before. Over $1,000 in 3 weeks from a small pizza place. No wonder we'd been coming up short every night. Then he congratulated me and told me I was the new assistant manager. He said he was bumping my pay to $13 an hour, and we would consider another raise after a preliminary period. $13 an hour. I had been making $8.50 before all this happened. It was like getting a completely different job. I stayed at that pizza place for several more years after this incident before I eventually left to focus on being a mom. I work as an accountant for a mid-sized company here in Russia. I'm 28 years old and live alone in what used to be my grandmother's apartment. My mom is 52 and still working while raising my 13-year-old brother. Money has always been tight for our family, but we manage. I had just blown through all my savings helping mom renovate her place when this whole mess started. My grandmother was the rock of our family. She owned several properties around the city and always made sure everyone was taken care of. When she started showing signs of dementia and Alzheimer's about 4 years ago, we all pitched in to help her. My mom especially went above and beyond, visiting daily and handling most of her care. 3 years ago, grandmother passed away at 73. The funeral was rough, but what came after was even worse. When we tried to start the inheritance process, my aunt started acting really strange. She kept making excuses about why she couldn't give us grandmother's death certificate. Every time we asked, she had some new reason for the delay. I finally had to step in and take over all the paperwork because mom was overwhelmed. That's when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. The apartment where grandmother had lived for decades, the one where I was currently staying, was no longer in her name. Somehow, it had been signed over to my aunt's children. When I dug deeper, I found out that most of grandmother's valuable properties had been transferred to my aunt months before grandmother died. I went to mom first to ask if she knew anything about this. She told me she had no idea about any transfers and that grandmother was already really confused by the time these papers were supposedly signed. When I asked her about grandmother's mental state during that period, mom explained that if it was 6 months before grandmother died, she definitely wasn't capable of understanding what she was signing. The dementia was really bad by then, and grandmother couldn't even remember mom's name half the time. I still didn't want to believe my aunt would do something so horrible to her own sister. I decided to go talk to her directly, thinking maybe there was some reasonable explanation. I asked her to help me understand what happened with the property transfers that occurred before grandmother passed away. What she said next will be burned into my memory forever. She told me it was none of my damn business, and that she was getting everything she could get her hands on. She said whatever was left that had to be shared, she would make sure mom and I got nothing. When I asked how she could say that about her own sister after everything mom had done for her over the years, she just said mom should have thought about that before deciding to be so naive. I went home that night feeling sick to my stomach. The next morning I had to break the news to mom. When I told her what our aunt had said, mom broke down completely. She sobbed for an hour asking how her sister could do this to her. She reminded me how she had helped our aunt get started in her sports career and lent her money when she was struggling. I told mom we were going to fight this because those papers were signed when grandmother wasn't mentally competent. Mom worried we didn't have money for lawyers. Fortunately, I had become friends with our company lawyer and he agreed to help us out. We gathered all the medical records showing grandmother's mental state and prepared our case. We sent my aunt a formal letter saying we would contest everything in court. That's when my life turned into a nightmare. It started with phone calls from my aunt's sons, my cousins. My oldest cousin called and threatened me, saying I better drop the lawsuit or I would regret it. When I asked if he was threatening me, he told me to take it however I wanted. I recorded every single call. Then they started following me around, showing up at my workplace and near my apartment. My boss had offered me a company driver before, and I finally took him up on it for safety reasons. One morning I was heading to work as usual. The driver was waiting downstairs. I walked out of my apartment building and my oldest cousin was standing right there. Before I could react, he punched me straight in the face. He told me this was just the beginning. If I didn't drop the case, then ran off. The driver caught the whole thing on his dashboard camera and rushed me to the hospital. We took everything to the police the next day. My aunt was furious when the police contacted her looking for her son. She called me and screamed that I was a piece of garbage and demanded to know how I dared involve the police in family business. I reminded her that her son had assaulted me and that he was the one who involved the police. She told me I had no idea what was coming for me. A week later, I woke up in the middle of the night to loud banging on my door. Before I could get there, the door burst open and two huge men walked into my apartment. They announced that this was their place now too and handed me some papers. They told me that if I wanted to stay healthy, I should pack my stuff and get out. I called the police immediately, but when they checked the paperwork, everything was legal. My aunt had given these men a portion of her ownership rights to the apartment, which meant they could legally live there. For the next 3 months, my life was hell. They kept changing the locks, so I had to pick them to get into my own home. They played loud music all night, left trash everywhere, and made it impossible to sleep. But I refused to leave. After 3 months, they finally gave up and moved out. I guess I was more stubborn than they expected. The night before our court date, one of my cousins tried one last desperate move. He snuck into my building and started spraying pepper spray under my door, trying to force me out. Lucky for me, I was doing some repair work and had towels stuffed under all the doors to keep dust from spreading. I barely smelled the pepper spray. The next day in court, we presented all our evidence, the recordings of threats, the video of the assault, the medical records showing grandmother's mental state. The judge ruled in our favor completely, saying that based on the evidence presented, it was clear the property transfers were made when grandmother lacked mental capacity, so all transfers were void. When we got home from court, I went to report the pepper spray incident to the police. That's when they told me something that changed everything. They explained they needed to question me about the previous night's incident because my elderly neighbor had died from lung complications caused by pepper spray exposure. The final pieces fell into place over the next few months. Today I just returned from the notary where mom officially signed all of grandmother's properties into her name. We received substantial compensation for the assault and threats. My aunt is stuck in her tiny apartment while her oldest son sits in prison for assault, threats, and homicide. Her other son got fired from the emergency rescue team and can't work for any government agency anymore. Since that's all he knew how to do, he's completely unemployed. They're completely broke now. And honestly, they brought it all on themselves. The problem started about 6 months ago when our distribution center got new management. These guys seemed to think they knew everything about how we should be doing our jobs, even though most of them had never worked in a retail store. They started sending us complaint after complaint about how we were handling returned merchandise. The first complaint came on a Monday morning. My manager called me into his office and showed me the email. He told me that distribution was saying we weren't properly securing merchandise for transport. When I asked what that meant exactly, since we followed all the standard procedures, he said he had asked them the same question. Their response was that we needed to use more twine to tie things down. This was rich coming from the distribution center. These were the same guys who thought it was clever to hide glass tabletops on top of mattresses during transport. We'd gotten shipments where expensive glass tables were completely shattered because someone thought a mattress would provide adequate protection. But somehow, we were the ones not securing things properly. So we started using more twine. Every returned appliance, every recalled item, every warranty return got extra rope and tie-downs. 2 days later, another complaint arrived. Then another one the following week. Each time they said we weren't using enough twine. Each time we added more. My manager was getting frustrated because every complaint meant filling out an incident response and resolution report, and he was doing them every other day. After almost a month of this nonsense, I'd had enough. The breaking point came when I walked into work on Monday morning to find yet another complaint on my desk. This one had pictures showing our perfectly secured items and arrows pointing to spots where they thought we needed more rope. That's when I decided to give them exactly what they were asking for. I came in early the next day when I knew we had an extra person scheduled. I gathered up the 6 items we needed to send back that day: a refrigerator, an oven, 2 dryers, a barbecue grill, and a reclining chair that had been recalled for structural issues. Then I went to the supply closet and grabbed 2 large bales of twine, the heavy-duty stuff we usually saved for the biggest appliances. I backed the trailer up to the loading dock and locked myself inside. What I was about to do was going to take a while, and I didn't want anyone accidentally walking in and ruining the surprise. I started by creating what amounted to a hammock system using the anchor points built into the trailer walls. I wove the twine back and forth, creating a web-like structure that could support heavy weight. One of my co-workers helped me hoist the first dryer up onto this makeshift hammock so it sat suspended about a foot off the trailer floor. My co-worker asked if I was sure about this since it seemed like a lot of work. I told him to trust me because this was going to be worth it. Once the dryer was in position, I wrapped it with layer after layer of twine, securing it against the side wall so tightly that it couldn't move even an inch. Then I did the same thing with the second dryer, positioning it at a different angle. The oven was next, followed by the barbecue grill. Each item got its own custom suspension system and enough twine to probably secure a small aircraft. The refrigerator was definitely the trickiest. It was heavy and awkward, but I was determined to get it off the ground like everything else. I built an extra strong hammock system and managed to get it suspended with the doors propped open just to show how stable the whole setup was. The reclining chair ended up being kind of artistic. I suspended it in a reclined position and wrapped it so thoroughly that it looked like some kind of modern art installation. The whole process took about 7 hours. By the time I was finished, I'd used both bales of twine and created what looked like a giant spider web inside the trailer. Everything was suspended off the ground. Nothing could move even a millimeter, and the entire load was more secure than anything we'd ever sent them before. For the finishing touch, I created one final web across the back of the trailer and attached a note right in the center where they couldn't miss it. The note read, "Take pictures before unpacking. If everything is still off the ground, please stop sending complaints. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." I was pretty proud of my handiwork. If they wanted more twine, they'd gotten more twine than they'd probably ever seen in their lives. The response came faster than I expected. 3 days later, our district vice president showed up at the store unannounced. He was not happy. He demanded that our store manager issue some kind of formal reprimand for whoever was responsible for what he called the spider web incident. The distribution center had been so shocked by what they found that they'd taken pictures and sent them all the way up the corporate chain. Our manager called all the warehouse staff into his office that afternoon. There were 6 of us standing there, and I was pretty sure I was about to get fired. Our manager looked at all of us and said he didn't know who did it, and frankly, he didn't care. He told us that the stunt we pulled was amazing, reckless, but well executed. He explained that he'd been asked to prepare a pink slip for disciplinary action, but in the name field for the employee being disciplined, he would put the name Peter Parker. We all tried not to smile, but it was hard. Our boss clearly had our back, and he was clever enough to use the Spider-Man reference from my note. We never got another complaint about inadequate twine usage. The distribution center went completely silent on the subject. I think seeing everything suspended in midair like that finally drove home the point that we knew how to secure merchandise just fine. I don't think the vice president ever figured out the Peter Parker reference, because we never heard anything else about it after that day. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.